Paul wrote a tiny little epistle to Titus while he was on the island of Crete. I don't know how long it took to get there, right? You mentioned praying for the government. Is it Tuesday, his election day? And I remember going as a kid to Kenwood Elementary with my mama, sitting down there. I think I got a sucker afterwards. She got a little sticker. I didn't get one of those stickers because I didn't vote. But the time I became of age, we were all doing mail-in voting, right? And it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to prayerfully and considerately, and if you're like, you know what, I just do it, I just know what to do, but maybe if there's other people in your home, be like, hey, let's go through this process. Let's open our guide, let's look our stack of mailers, whatever that came, I don't know. Like me, you collect them, right? My wife doesn't let them get inside the house, and I'm like, we gotta process this. We gotta, so forth. But you gotta look through and just consider that. So it's a great opportunity to love our neighbors and to be excellent citizens here in this county and in this state. So I'm not gonna overhype it. I'm just gonna say it's a reminder. Last Sunday, I was like, did we miss it? No, it's this coming Tuesday. Primary, you know what's going on. All right. Titus chapter 2. Now, I got to become a baseball coach this year, and I've waited 30 years for this moment, right? I retired of my career after high school, and I waited 30 years, right? So, coaches meeting right before, and these kids are ages 7 and 8, okay? So just temper our expectations here. One son is on that. The other one is on 5 and 6. Now, they both independently named their team the Foxes. They both wear red. So one is the Red Foxes and one of them is the Fire Foxes. Okay, not to be confused, right? And so Kari's a team mom of the Fire Foxes and we're the Foxes. And anyways, number 7 and number 8, they're for it. But the boys are big deal. They love it so much that they lose their gear before the game, right? It's always set, it's always in the right spot, it's always right there, and they just can't find it. And I go, this is why we put that all together. I'm just repeating to myself, apparently, all of these things, right? And so right there, I'm meeting with Coach Craig, and he's the head coach, and he's like, I don't have a background in baseball, but I've been doing this for years. I'm just so glad you're here. And I was like, oh, what drills do you like to do with the boys and the girls? So it's a co-ed team. And he says, at this age, if we can get them to pay attention, that will be half of it. And I was like, oh yeah, totally, yeah. We'll incorporate one of those drills. He was not overstating that fact. And if you come down to the park on Fridays at 5:30 to 6:30, you will notice a lot of not paying attention. But they all got their uniforms. We pray, we get up there, and they're like, what position am I? And they run out, and then they come back and goes, where's that? All right? And I was like, center field is in the center of the field. So I want you to stand on home plate and go right through the pitchers right there. And there's people in the way. It was like, well, don't, right? And they're just constantly, right? And so you think, if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times, right? Now, different skills and different abilities and different awareness, and it's just so adorable. And one of our team moms said to me a couple weeks ago at practice, she goes, if you stick with this, and when these kids are in high school, they're going to have a great coach. And I knew what she meant. You're teaching two ahead of them, right? I mean, we've known her, and I was like, I understand what you're saying. She's like, no, I mean it really well. And I was like, keeping your toe up while you do a grounder is kind of not what they need to do at this age. However, I'd like you to pay attention, okay? There's a difference between telling someone something and teaching it. And that difference is relationship. In fact, if you tell someone even 1,000 times and you don't teach it to them, they're not going to pay attention. Now, there's a third level to that the Apostle Paul gets into here in the book of Titus. But we'll get to that in a moment. Titus chapter 2 begins this way. Pastor Jerry taught through this passage 1 to 10. They all go together through 15. So we'll go to verse 11 to 15. He excellently walked us through what does it look like, the older and the younger, the men and the women, life on life. It's not efficient, but it's effective. Right? It's not efficient to have all of the age groups and the different separate on the baseball field at Tuesday night practice, but it certainly is more effective, because otherwise there'd be a lot of standing around, right? And the stronger and the faster would get all the reps, and the younger would just be like, could I go play on that playground with my siblings, right? But as for you, teach what accords with sound doctrine, healthy doctrine, meaning that what God has said in his word is healthy for us. And then we embrace it, and when we embody it, we're changed. Now, he doesn't say, tell everyone what accords with sound doctrine. It's a specific word, to teach. What does it mean to teach? Now, let's go to verse 11. Skipping down to the next paragraph here. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. That's all one verse, and then one sentence, and then this last one to Titus. Declare these things and exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one disregard you. Okay? Now, I only want to talk about that verse. No, we're going to go back. Why would Paul remind Titus to do this? Because he is, in effect, swimming upstream. Nothing in their culture, nothing on the island, nobody is going to be talking about the grace of God training you to be a different person. Apparently, there, as in many other places, when they hear about the grace of God, they're like, that's awesome. I'm forgiven. I have a new start. I can now do whatever I want. Right? Like, just begin again. That's awesome. I never have to change. God forgives. He knows us. And we hear that in our day as someone says, God knows my heart. As if that's an excuse to not be godly. Right? Now, we don't know all of the things that were going on, but what is evident is that Titus was supposed to be just right there, like a coach. Just right there, not just barking out orders, but involved. So much so that he would disappear, and one day he would disappear, but that the whole culture was changed. And even the teammates, the older players, men and women and the younger, would be teaching one another. And so they wouldn't be like, well, what did you just tell us to do, Titus? But they'd forget about him and they'd be like, God has taught me this. Right? It's one thing to hear about prayer requests from moms, right? And from moms. It's another thing to get involved nitty gritty. It's easy to drive by and be like, well, have you tried this? And then disappear. But it's harder to get involved, to teach, or as the next verse says, to train one another. All right, let's go through them verse by verse. Verse 11, the grace of God has come. And the grace of God has a name. His name is Jesus. He is our Savior. Paul is not only poetic in this, but he's prophetic in this. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people. Grace is what changes people. Yelling at them, demanding that they do better, can improve for a moment. Okay, yep, I got it. But that relationship of grace, I see your failures, and I don't hold it against you. Let's begin again. Is what changes people. Another way of saying it, love. It was what changes people, right? You know the evidence or the outcome of a loving, gracious family versus a non-loving, ungracious family. You'd see the evidence all over the place because a loving, gracious person grows out of that loving, gracious family. In both families are lots of failure. But in the one where you cannot be forgiven and you cannot learn grace, you learn to hide. It's not like you do less bad, but it's mainly about not doing bad. We don't do that in this family. Rather than, oh, tell me about that. And I'm going to tell you a story in a minute that's very present this very day. I was praying through my notes. Jerry's like, how you doing? I was like, I'm good. And I had these two boys around me. Anyways, I'll save the story for a little bit, but I didn't know how to illustrate it. And then it became to me like, they're right here. And it was more about me as a father than them as a kid. But the grace of God right here is unmerited divine favor. Okay, that's a good definition. It seems very wooden. I'm like, oh, that's the answer, right? But you see how Paul puts it? The grace of God has appeared. He's so happy about this. Like, he is like, do people understand how great grace is? One author from a few centuries ago said that humanity is like an inebriated man on a horse. He falls off one side, gets up, and does what? Falls off the other side, okay? So when you hear grace, you're like, anything goes, or, people are going to take advantage of that, right? And neither of those, right? License, do whatever you want. Sorry, I'm pointing over here, right? This is like, do whatever we want. Or they're like, don't do that. The Apostle Paul in other places, don't presume upon the grace of God. We don't use the grace of God to do whatever we want. In fact, the vision is that God would actually change us at the level of our desires, which is what this passage is about. Not only don't misuse the grace of God and the grace of people who love you, but rather your hearts would be changed. The grace of God has appeared, past tense. Jesus came in actual history. He really lived that life, a life of total purity and obedience to God, a life of perfection and graciousness. You read all of his interactions with everyone, and it is like he is so patient, he is so kind. he like, you don't know what he's going to do next because you're like, I wouldn't relate to that person that way. Many times people around him who weren't on the license side, meaning you get to do whatever you want, but were more on the, maybe we would describe legalistic side, meaning I'm keeping score, I'm doing pretty good. You're not doing good, which makes me feel better about how I'm doing. And because I only count certain things, I know that God accepts me because of that. It's very insecure. So as you leave today, we're going to give you a list of 10 things to stop doing this week, right? God's ambition for our lives is much bigger than stopping doing bad. So much so, he's such a creative teacher that let's say you're a person who you're not going to murder anyone, right? So we're not there. But you don't mind dishing a little bit of news about them, right? You're like, we didn't get to this in the prayer requests earlier, but I just need to tell you, and I just hope that we would pray. Right? And you dish it to someone else and they're like, what do I do with this information, right? You know what God will put into your life? Someone who does that to you and about you. Not to shame you, but to change us. Right? Because he loves us, because he's a good father. And he is about training us. The thing that is so amazing about experiencing grace is that here Paul says that we can actually encounter grace. So that we're not just telling people about this experience. We went to this church and it's so gracious and the people are so awesome. And he's like, you don't know half of it. We're neither as good as you think, nor as bad as you feared, but we have encountered the grace of God. And we've learned that the grace of God is for all kinds of people. When he says the grace of God has appeared to all people, he's not saying everyone will get saved, but anybody can. Nobody. It's not just the noble people. It's not just this people group of this ethnicity or people of this status. It is anyone can come to Christ because Christ is grace. And that is the motivation to change. Now, about the time that I retired from my baseball career, amateur, high school, I remember school assemblies. And school assemblies were fun. We did like gladiator stuff. I remember there was a lawsuit, so I think they stopped that. This teacher's a little too aggressive about it, right? But they would often do assemblies. And you've known these assemblies. There's a car wreck. It like somehow happened in the gymnasium. And whatever. And then I heard this week about one in our school, we had like students who looked like they had died in it, right? And like makeup and everything. And then they made it a whole day that this person is taken out and they're weeping and like there's actors and all this stuff. And I was like, that's horrific. Like, did this change anybody? No, this gentleman said at the men's huddle, he's like, actually, we all knew that the person who had supposedly died was one of the biggest partiers at the school, but was on the student leadership team that conceived of this and then grant money and this and that. I'll tell you what, that was an era of all of those things, the shock and awe of it. It didn't change people. Thankfully, we have laws that keep people from drunk driving. Thankfully, we have stiff penalties that keep people. Thankfully, we can share our stories of like we've lost a loved one. That is horrific, right? But what will actually change a person is experiencing the love of God. Be like, I don't need to actually seek this good for my life through inebriation, but I can experience the joy of God, right? So those fear tactics, I understand why they do them. That's not how you change a person. Come to today. How many times did I say to my little boys, guys, if you don't stop bothering each other, I'm going to turn this car around and go back home. Okay. It lasts about 3 minutes. When we get going, one of them always gets, and they love it. They unlock the doors, and we forget some stuff. We didn't do quite the TVs. We did most of it, right? And then we're doing a few details, and then I go, boys, get in here. We're speed walking. We're not running. It's like, okay. So then we go out, and we get in the car, and one of them's crying because he understands what's going on, and the other one's like, do we get a snack out of here? And I was like, no. We are driving home. They don't understand the time. Like time wouldn't work that way. We didn't have enough time to do that. So I texted Kari and I said, hey, I'd like you to start when you say you're going to go, and we'll meet you along the way, and I'll drop them off. And they're crying, and they're. It seems like that assembly of fear technique. No, I love you. You're not mature enough to come and do the church work. Daddy's got to give his attention to what I'm doing. But I am your dad, so we're going to spend this time. Now, how it turned out was we made our way towards Karis, and we pulled over and went to a different church. We went to New Life. They started at 9 o'clock. We walked in. They're like, oh, are you new here? And I was like, yes, but right. And a few people, oh, what are you doing here? And there, I was like, boys, I want you to watch what these other kids are doing. Now, there were a few little crazy kids trying to run around, right? And I was like, what are they doing? And they're like, they shouldn't be doing that, right? Right? Now, I would love to tell you, wrap a bow on it, that just worked out. Everything just is so great, and they're changed. Or even that, like, I did the exact thing that I'm supposed to do as a father. I don't know. But I'm not just telling them. or even teaching, which I think is good, but rather training. Grace trains us. That's what verses 12 to 14 I think is about. For the grace of God, right, has appeared to all men, has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age. Good works that's been described earlier in this chapter flow from a good heart, from a trained heart, from a changed heart. And when we experience frustration, for them, the frustration that Daddy was being mean, and then later, Dad, now we get it. To which I wanted to say cynically, but do you? But I didn't, because I'm in this for the long haul. I know that I look out and I was like, hey, in a dozen years, if I don't grow weary in doing good, they'll turn out well. Like I can look at that in my even own home, okay? But trains us. Because this is more than information. This is formation and transformation. We're in the process of being formed. We are disciplined by grace. So sometimes it's a great parenting technique. You know, I could have taken them, Sunday, I'm not going to do this, but, you know, taken them to ice cream and be like, I just want you guys to experience grace, and then we'll head back to church. I wasn't going to do that, right? Because they needed to understand the consequences of their actions and not just be sent out. Come back when you can figure it out, but rather let's go this together. This is not cheap grace. This is costly grace. This actually costs me something. And it certainly costs God something. For the grace of God is not cheap. It cost the Son his life. Now, if we go to verse 12, it says, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and to live controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age. Let's read in the NLT. And we are instructed to turn from godless living and sinful pleasures. We should live in this evil world with wisdom, righteousness, and devotion to God. How do you learn how to do that? How do you learn how to do that? By someone teaching you, by someone training you. And I wish it was so easy, like, God, just do that in me. And he says, I am doing that in you. And I've sent brothers and sisters alongside you, imperfect as they are, who are going to teach you how to do that. But I just wish you would just do it, just zap me, you know? Just change me. It's like, no, he does it through intentional community. When you, as the bigger brother, blame your little brother for how you're being childish, it's like, no, we're not doing that. There are consequences for all of this. And this is how he not only redeems us, this is how he reforms us, and this is how he goes on to verse 13, rewards us. Because teaching and training involve relationship. To tell someone something, whether over the airwaves or just a drive-by or the internet or even in your own, hey, stop doing that, does not involve a relationship. You may have a relationship with them, but that is a very low investment. It costs way more of us to get involved, to be right there, to care about this person, to love them for what is best for them. So that is what we get to do. Now, the good thing is whatever God requires, he also provides. This is what he provides for us. And I'm not sure if this one's a blank on the notes. It's a bonus. But I believe it is true, for I wasn't going to ask my sons of something that they couldn't do. I need you to stop running into the walls and running into each other and hitting things, requiring them to what they actually can do. For actually God knows our heart, and he wants to change us to the level. Now, this is really important when we get to verse 14, is that who we belong to determines who we become and how we live. I wanted to cleverly put it, whose before do's, and it was a little bit W-H-O-S-E, and Jerry's like, this week, he's like, I think this is really unclear. It's not as clever as you think it is. But verse 14, very patient brother helped me, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession. Right. I could be driving down the 213 South and be like, sons, I'm just so worried that you're going to end up in jail. And we could have gone, actually, we drove right by the jail. We could have gone right there. This is where you're going to end up if you could. And it is true. It is true. If I don't correct them now, and they just free range or whatever, that's how that becomes, right? Or I just disappear and the siblings got to raise them or whatever, right? But taking the long view recognizes this is how this person will not only change, but to grow into a citizen who does more than just vote on the whatever Tuesday, right? They're just godly and patient and kind, and other people will be like, who made you? And could I borrow your stuff? And could you teach me how to live? Let alone how to catch a baseball. And this is how he changes to the level of desires from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession. God owns us. So we're not doing this to look good to each other. Certainly not telling that story to tell you I'm a great father. It's like, man, I have really failed here. Not in the big ways, but in the small ways of the training, like getting you ready to be here. Okay, let's recalibrating. For his own possession, God owns us who are zealous for good works. We do better by becoming better, by becoming God's people. And this is how transformed people transform the world. Now, earlier, the passage talked about older and younger, and there's these mentoring relationships. And there on the island, Crete, they probably didn't have a lot of godly people of different ages, and so they had to be real specific, like, hey, you two, and like, you're just 2 days ahead of her. You're just 3 days ahead of him. And it's not just information, but you see that quality of life, and it took them leaning in together. But there has to be, before you get to the practicals, there has to be that decisive thought in your life. I'm no longer pretending to be someone that I'm not. I'm not just going through the motions. Paul put it this way in 2 Corinthians. He said, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 15. Christ died for everyone so that those who receive his new life will no longer live for themselves. Instead, they will live for Christ, who died and was raised for them. We know that's true of the Apostle Paul. We know that he is the one who lived that way, right? But he's actually saying everyone is supposed to live that way. It's not the super Christians, it's all the Christians live this way. In previous passages, we're talking about the leaders and this and that, and now we're realizing, like, oh, this is all of us. All of us get to live this way. And here's one of my questions. Do you know the good works to which God has called you? Maybe in this specific season, whether this specific hour or this specific month or this season, you're like, God, this spring, I need you to know, not just I'm doing stuff, I'm doing the duty, I'm doing everything people ask, but God, where is your yes and amen in my life? How am I supposed to devote myself to love and good works? And it's almost always going to be relational, which takes more of us. It takes more of us. For some people, they're called to do lots of good works here and there, telling people stuff. But I think for the majority of us, it's a life on life, that is inefficient but is effective. It's the most effective way to live. And he will show you the good works to which he has called you. In fact, he'll make it so obvious that you'll be kind of in pain points. And you might just, this is a great question, ask in community. Say you're in your home group. Say you're in a men's Bible study, women's Bible study. Let's say you're just after church, like, hey, I don't know, I'm not even in something yet. Let's form something. What do you think the good works I'm called to? Now, if someone asks you that, don't just like, well, for me, it's always that, like, really, pause before you give the answer, okay? Because this person wants to hear from God and not just from Jeff or whatever your name is, okay? But the thing is that the leaders have a specific role, and their job is to rebuke and to correct, not everybody, but the people who are deliberately doing it wrong. The people who are misusing the grace of God, the people who are being self-righteous, the people who like to tell everyone what's going on rather than actually be really there. And so that is why I'd say swimming upstream, different motives and mindset from the world. And church leaders are like upstream swimming coaches. If you ever try to do something in the current, it exaggerates what you're doing. Right? I don't need to talk about swimming. You always realize once that you're just going to go veer, right? So everything is a little bit more, right? And our culture just wants you to float. And what floats? Dead things. Fish do not float downstream. They don't do that. Well, they do if they're dead, right? They swim upstream or they swim out to sea, right? But they're specifically doing this, and we are alive. And so we don't think of the grace of God the same way that the watching world thinks about it. We don't think about each other the way that watching world. We don't think about ourselves the way the watching world thinks. So Paul says to Titus, it's very similar, he says to Timothy, declare these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one disregard you. I do not believe that Titus's job was to walk around on blast and just tell everyone what's up. I think he's giving them that to say, you won't want to do this. Do this mainly in private. Like, right? The main message is the grace of God and how that changes us, but sometimes you have to go to a specific person and say, hey, what's going on here? Let's go for a ride. I don't want to, right? We're going to go watch how other people participate, and we'll come back. Now, I'm going out of order on purpose because I want us to end with verse 13, which speaks of the return of Christ, which is our blessed hope. There is the past, the grace of God has come, has appeared in Jesus. The grace of God is Jesus. There's the present. He is teaching us to deny our ungodly passions. That is hard work. It's easy enough to help kids deny their ungodly passions, let alone also ourselves as well. But that's what the church family does. But what makes it all worth it? This work that we're employed in right here is verse 13. Waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. Waiting for our blessed hope. It's very clear from the context that this waiting doesn't involve just standing there. This waiting involves activity, right? This waiting involves trusting God. This waiting involves putting away sin in our lives. This waiting involves being trained, not just told or taught, but trained. Is Christ your blessed hope today? Is Christ your blessed hope today? If you're like, you know what, I believe in Christ, and I'm leaning towards him in my life. And I'm not what I should be, but I'm not what I used to be because of Christ. Not just getting better myself, not just improving myself, but Jesus, who came for us, lived that life, and is coming back again for us to wrap up history and also reward us in the next life. Is he your blessed hope? And if he is your blessed hope, you will live differently. You will not get bent out of shape. This is how you can tell. You get bent out of shape about every little thing. It's true. It's not attractive. It's not attractive at any age if someone just like, everything's like, but in Christ is my blessed hope. I go, all right, buckle up, kids. We got a little learning to do, okay? Because Christ is our blessed hope, we know that he deals with us differently. On your welcome guide, I asked 2 other questions. What is God teaching you? And how is he training you by grace? It might be he's teaching you about your path for good works. I'm supposed to get involved in this specific ministry or this need with other people. Opportunity. And sometimes it feels like, well, I know I should, but you're like, no, actually I get to, because Christ is my blessed hope. I get to relate this way. And the passage is so saturated with God's good news that I just want to reinforce it. Are you among the people God redeemed and purified who are zealous for good works? It is possible, and it might have been possible there on the island of Crete. It's possible to be in church and not actually be among these people. To just kind of go through the motions and, yeah, I try to do better. One of the ways you can tell if you're just kind of going through the motions is you're actually not zealous for good works. You want other people to see you doing good. Right? To keep up that appearance. But in the secret, in the private parts of your life, you're actually not zealous for good works, but jealous. Angry with God that he hasn't come through on some area that you expect him to. Most often frustrated with the people around you who, well, they don't live up to what you want them to be doing. But God is the judge of the living and the dead. You see, these passages, even about grace, they confront us. And they help us realize, like, I actually am not changing in the level that I ought to. And so this gives us an opportunity to respond. We're going to come to the communion table in a moment, but before Pastor Jerry describes that and leads us, before we respond in song, as you look through that passage, there's going to be a phrase, there's going to be some word from God that is going to stick out to you. And not mainly so you can tell other people about it. There might be that, like, oh, I need to tell you about this, right? Yes. You really learn something when you teach it, yes. But he's teaching you about you. He's teaching you about who you are and what he wants for you. My little boys, when they hopped in that car, I know they didn't forget that I loved them, because of course they know that, but they weren't thinking about that, right? They were thinking, oh, we lost it. Does this mean we're not getting a snack from the snack place? You know, like 100% not. Let me confirm that fear. But as we calmly went and we came back, by the time it turned to laughter. It turned to hope. It turned to funny, right? Not disrespectful, right? But like there's a peace of like, oh, God has bigger plans than what I'm holding on to right now. So, Brother Jerry, will you come up and guide us in responding to the gospel and lead us into communion?